A Second Chance at Love. Previous episodes are available in playlist. A link is given in the video description. Episode 8. Mother of Estella. That night, after Roxanne asked Archie and Benny to head to bed, she went back to the room to take care of Estella. Once Catalina learned that Estella had recovered, she stuck to the girl's side like glue. In fact, the two women even showered Estella together. Catalina's heart ached when she saw the bruise on Estella's bottom. Instantly, she could not help but complain, "Who did this? Ms. Estella has always been in poor health, and Mr. Farwell can't even bring himself to be stern with her." Hearing that, Estella blinked at Catalina. Nevertheless, when she thought about Aubrey's warning, she clamped her mouth shut. All of a sudden, Roxanne recalled what Lucian had said back at the haunted house. The mystery of Estella's mother's identity kept swirling in her head. Upon thinking about how Catalina had been working in the Farwell residence for all those years and about how she might know something, Roxanne asked in a nonchalant tone, "Catalina, why didn't Essie's mother come and visit her despite how bad her Jarvis? Catalina will be taking care of you for the next few days here," Lucian said to Estella in a gentle tone. Estella bobbed her head obediently. Even though she was reluctant to let her father leave, she quite liked living in Roxanne's place. When Lucian saw Roxanne walking over, he straightened up and looked at her. "Something has cropped up at my company, so I have to leave first. Essie's just recovered, and her condition is still a little unstable. I was thinking of having her live with you for 2 more days. Catalina will be here to take care of her. If this troubles you, you can ask Catalina to bring her back after she's done cleaning up the table." Roxanne stood transfixed for a moment before she patted the girl's head. "It's all right. Let her stay here." Episode was? Did some other emergency happen? Hearing that, Catalina visibly stiffened before looking at Roxanne in shock. She thought Roxanne had known that Estella was her child all along. After all, she gave birth to Estella. That was why the question startled her that much. "Ms. Jarvis is subtly asking me who's Essie's biological mother? How am I supposed to answer that?" A moment of hesitation later, Catalina asked, "Did Mr. Farwell not talk to you about this before?" Roxanne thought that her response was strange, but she could not fathom why. "Hence," she replied, "he only told me that Essie's biological mother isn't Aubrey. So Mr. Farwell knows about this as well, but he didn't tell Ms. Jarvis about it." Catalina came to a conclusion at that. She then smiled at Roxanne and said, "Did you think that it was Ms. Pearson all along? Ms. Estella looks nothing like her." "I'm not sure why you thought that." Roxanne chuckled. "Then can you tell me who's Essie's biological mother?" Catalina shook her head. "This is Mr. Farwell's personal matter. I wouldn't dare to tell anyone about it. It's best for you to wait until Mr. Farwell tells you about it himself." With that said, Catalina threw herself back into her work. She dared not continue the topic any longer, for she was afraid that she might let something slip. When Roxanne noticed how Catalina was avoiding the topic, she stopped prodding for more information. Still, a trace of suspicion lingered in her mind. After all, she had seen for herself how obsessed Lucian was with Aubrey all those years ago. In fact, the man had even declared that Aubrey was the only one worthy of being his wife. How did he end up having a child with another woman then? What kind of feelings does he have toward Aubrey? Could it be that their feelings for each other are fading after 6 years? Roxanne simply could not seem to find an answer no matter how hard she tried. Instead, she only made herself frustrated. To not be with him in the meantime, at the Farwell residence, Sonia and Elias were about to rest. When they heard the sudden ringing of the doorbell, they hastily opened the door. Instantly, they were greeted by the apologetic faces of Samuel and Gina. Aubrey was behind them, her eyes red. What happened? Sonia asked in confusion when she registered the trio's expressions. Gina turned to shoot Aubrey a glare. Aubrey's eyes were bloodshot, and remorse was written all over her face. Even her voice was a little hoarse as she said, "Mrs. Farwell, I've come to apologize." Sonia became even more puzzled by that response. She then led the three to the couch and had the maid pour them cups of tea before asking, "What happened? Why are you apologizing to me?" Aubrey kept her head low, not daring to look at Sonia at all. "You convinced Essie to get into my car yesterday morning, so I thought she'd be quiet while I bring her to the kindergarten. However, she began kicking up a fuss and insisting on getting down from the car midway. She even tried to open the door despite how dangerous it was. After bathing Estella, Roxanne brought the girl to bed. Even then, she continued to wonder about the subject. It seemed like Estella could see that Roxanne had something on her mind, for the girl buried herself into Roxanne's arms slowly before looking at the woman with big, concerned eyes. As Roxanne looked at the girl's clear eyes, she recollected herself and hugged her. Her heart melted when her arms wrapped around the small and soft body. At the same time, she found herself letting go of the niggling question. The identity of Estella's biological mother and the current relationship between Lucian and Aubrey had nothing to do with her at all. She and Lucian should have been strangers. They were only interacting because of Estella. That was all. Overthinking things would only make her feel even more frustrated. I tried to stop her, but she refused to listen to me. In the end, I got too anxious and hit her a few times after I stopped the car. The moment Sonia and Elias heard that Sonia had laid a finger on Estella, their expressions darkened. Aubrey continued in a miserable tone, "I really didn't mean it. I know it's my fault, I shouldn't have done anything to a kid. Estella's so cute, and she's your precious princess. Even now, I feel like slapping myself for having done that. If only I was more patient at that time." The sight of her remorseful demeanor, Sonia's dark expression lightened up a little. "If you know that you've done wrong, you should know that it's pointless to come to us. You should be apologizing to Essie instead. You can't do this anymore in the future." A conflicted look crossed Aubrey's face. "Mrs. Farwell, that's what I thought too, but Lucian found out about this matter. He's furious, it's normal for him to be mad. Have a good talk with him." A line appeared between Sonia's brows. She felt that Lucian had gone a little overboard with his response. Just as she said that, she saw Aubrey turn even paler. "I don't mind doing anything as long as Lucian forgives me, but," the younger woman trailed off. Gina, who was beside her, then said, "Sonia, you have no idea how severe things are. Lucian's absolutely livid. It was as if he had lost his mind last night. He even attacked Aubrey. Look, he then lifted Aubrey's hair from behind her back to show Sonia the mark on Aubrey's neck. Both Sonia and Elias froze when they saw the bruise on Aubrey's neck. They never thought that Lucian would be so rough with her. Once they recomposed themselves, Sonia asked, "How's your bruise? Is it bad?" Aubrey pursed her lips and shook her head. "It's nothing. As long as Lucian forgives me, this injury is nothing." The upset Sonia felt toward Aubrey withered quite a bit when she saw the regretful look and bad bruise that Aubrey had. After all, they had witnessed with their own two eyes what Aubrey had done all those years. Furthermore, it was true that Estella was rather aloof and stubborn. It would be quite challenging for outsiders to take care of her. Therefore, Sonia could understand why Aubrey had hit Estella. Lucian's just caught up in his anger. "I apologize to you on behalf of him. Don't take this incident to heart," Sonia apologized to Aubrey. However, tears fell from Aubrey's eyes. Not letting her into the family at that, Sonia frowned. "Aubrey, what are you talking about? It's impossible for Lucian to be with Roxanne anymore. I've asked him about this before, and he told me that he's not thinking of getting back together with her, so don't overthink it." Still, Aubrey continued to sob. "But Essie is with Roxanne all day long now. In fact, she's living at Roxanne's place. Essie likes her so much. If Lucian isn't planning to be with her anymore, why would he have her take care of Essie?" Although Lucian had berated her about it, she still kept sending people to spy on Roxanne. The moment she found out that Estella was staying at Roxanne's place, Aubrey panicked. That was why she told her parents everything. After getting scolded by them, she was then brought over to apologize to Sonia and Elias. Then, when she heard Sonia forgiving her, she could not help but complain to her. Sonia never thought that Lucian would let that woman take care of Estella. She instantly fumed. "This is ridiculous. Who told him to do this?" Then, she forced her anger aside and consoled Aubrey. "Don't worry. There's no way they'll be together again. Even if Lucian wants to do that, I won't let that woman come back here." Aubrey shifted her doe eyes to Sonia to make sure that Sonia was serious about her words. Sonia uttered grimly, "That woman gave up on Essie herself back then. There's no way I'm going to let her take care of Essie again." A tiny sliver of confidence finally crept into Aubrey's heart at her promise. The few of them then chatted for a while longer before Gina led Aubrey away. They had gotten Sonia's promise, so they had achieved what they had come for. All that was needed was a few drops of tears from Aubrey. "Not only did I'm fine, but I might not be able to be with Lucian anymore. I can't even take care of Essie. I've betrayed the trust you've given to me. If Lucian chooses Roxanne, I'll definitely give them my blessings." Sonia not blame her for hitting the child, but she even felt that she had wronged Aubrey. In addition to that, she even promised not to let Roxanne into the family. In other words, they had hit two birds with one stone. Sonia could not sleep almost the entire night because of Aubrey's words. Consoling Aubrey was not the only reason she had told Aubrey that she was not going to let Roxanne into the family. It was also because she genuinely hated that ruthless woman. That ruthless woman was capable of abandoning Lucian and Estella once, so Sonia was sure that she would do it again. "I have no idea what my son's thinking about. I can't believe he's actually honking of having her marry into the family again. The more Sonia thought about it, the angrier she became. That night, she sent men to find out where Roxanne was living, planning to visit her the next day. By the time Roxanne woke the next morning, Catalina had already made breakfast. Just as she was eating breakfast with the 3 children, someone rang the doorbell. Roxanne then asked Catalina to take care of the children as she went to open the door. Originally, she thought that Lucian had come to pick them up for kindergarten, but she was dumbfounded by the person outside upon opening the door. "What's the matter? Do you not recognize me anymore?" Sonia was dressed to her nines by the doorway. The older woman looked at Roxanne from head to toe coldly before her eyes flicked to the inside of the house, wanting to find out if Estella really was at Roxanne's place. Roxanne snapped back to her senses. Although she did not know why Sonia was there, she knew that the other woman must not have come for a friendly visit. She was wary, but she still politely greeted, "Mrs. Farwell." Sonia inclined her head a little before shooting her a displeased glare. "Is this the manners you have? You let your guests stand by the doorway." Roxanne knitted her brows and forced down the rising emotions in her as she stepped aside. "Please come in." Sonia scoffed and strode in. She headed straight to the living room's couch and sat down. "Give up." Roxanne watched her sit down on the couch before she turned to close the door. After taking a seat on the armchair, she looked the older woman in the eyes and said, "Mrs. Farwell, may I know what's the reason for your early visit?" Sonia did not beat about the bush at all. "I've come to tell you to stay away from Lucian. Also, don't you try winning over Essie. She has nothing to do with you. You were the one who chose to get a divorce and leave without telling anyone, so you don't have the right to come back now." Hearing that, Roxanne nearly scoffed. She flatly replied, "Don't worry. I never thought of coming back when I chose to leave back then." "Is that so?" Sonia sneered. "Then explain why you met Lucian. Also, why is Essie here with you?" Sonia then stared at Roxanne contemptuously. "She said she's not coming back, but everything she's doing is to curry favor with them." "What a liar!" Roxanne's brows drew together as she changed into a more aggressive demeanor. "I think you've misunderstood something. It's but a coincidence that I met Lucian. Lucian had gone to meet old Mr. Queen when I was treating him. Also, Essie is going to the same kindergarten as my children. They're friends, so she often comes to play with them." Roxanne did not tell her about how Estella had been clingy to her when she was sick. With how hostile Sonia was to her, Roxanne was sure that she would assume that Roxanne was deluding herself. Yet, unexpectedly, despite Roxanne clarifying everything and doing her best to draw the line between her and Lucian and his daughter, Sonia still refused to let her go. "How can something so coincidental happen? It shouldn't be tricky for you to check the kindergarten with the status you now have. Why did you end up picking the one the Farwell family is investing in?" Sonia questioned. For a moment, Roxanne did not know how to explain it to Sonia. Madeline was the one who had recommended the kindergarten to her. Naturally, she would not think about looking into the kindergarten. If she had done an investigation, she would not have sent her 2 sons there in the first place. When Sonia heard nothing from Roxanne, she assumed that Roxanne was feeling too guilty to answer her. Thus, she scoffed and said, regardless of what kind of plan you have, I'm not going to let you join the family again. Give up. Roxanne nodded. Don't worry. I've never thought of going back there. I hope you'll remember what you've said, Sonia warned. Just then, the three children were done with their breakfast. When they came out, they saw Sonia. Archie and Benny were confused, but they could sense the hostile attitude that Sonia had toward their mother. Thus, they ran over to Roxanne, wanting to protect her. On the other hand, Estella recognized her grandmother and ran toward Sonia. She then looked at her grandmother with wide eyes, perplexed. Sonia ruffled her granddaughter's hair when she saw Estella. Essie, Bemud, and come home with grandma, okay? Hearing that, Estella shook her head without hesitation. She then turned around, ready to return to Roxanne's side. Sonia could see what she wanted to do, so she instantly shot out her hand to grab Estella's arm. Estella thrashed, but she could not struggle out of her grandmother's grip. Within seconds, her face was red with anxiety. Be good and come home with me. Sonia's tone was getting sterner and sterner by the second, and subconsciously, she gripped the girl tighter. Estella could feel the pain, but she did not want to leave Roxanne. The corners of her lips turned downward, and she began crying silently on the spot. It was only then Sonia realized that she seemed to have responded too harshly. Frowning, she let go of the girl, but Estella never stopped crying. End up just like them. When Catalina saw Estella sobbing her eyes out, she quickly stepped forward and said, Mrs. Farwell, Ms. Estella had an episode again, and Ms. Pearson hit her. Her condition has only started improving today and hasn't stabilized yet. Please don't scare her. Catalina had mulled over the incident the night before, and she could mostly guess who had hit Estella. To convince Sonia to stop, she had no choice but to steel herself and tell the other woman her speculation. However, Sonia seemed unfazed by that. Sonia has told me about this already. Essie was the one who had not been obedient, and Aubrey only punished her in that way in her panic. He has already apologized to me. Essie is at fault too. Aubrey will be her stepmother in the future, but she's still kicking up fusses like these. Hearing that, Catalina realized she could not say anything else. All she could do was cast a pitying look at Estella. The girl had just walked out of her own world recently. After this crying session, Catalina was afraid that she might revert to her state from the day before. After Archie and Benny heard their conversation, they guessed that the unfamiliar woman was Estella's grandmother. Nevertheless, they did not hold themselves back as they refuted, Essie didn't kick up a fuss. That bad woman is in the wrong to have hurt a kid. Why would you listen to an outsider and scold Essie? She's been badly hit, but you don't feel upset for her at all? If not for my mommy's care, Essie might not have recovered by now. Sonia was disgruntled with the way the children were chiding her. What do you know? Children shouldn't be intervening in the business of adults. With that said, she grabbed Estella's arm again. Look at them. They're completely uncultured. If you keep staying here, you're going to be just like them. Come home with me right now. Estella remained rooted to the spot, but her arm ached from Sonia's pull. Tears kept rolling down her cheeks as resistance shone brightly in her eyes. Roxanne had decided not to intervene in Estella's matters after the earlier conversation, but she was reminded of how the girl was like the day before at the sight of her tears. Hence, she drew her brows together and said, "Mrs. Farwell, I've heard that you dote on Essie a lot, but is this the way you dote on her? Essie's crying, but you won't even heed what she wants." Sonia gave her a side eye. "Who knows how you've bewitched my granddaughter?" Just as the two were at a standstill, someone rang the doorbell again. Knowing that it must be their father, Archie dashed to the door to open it. Lucian froze for a second when he saw the boy. Then, he noticed the tinge of anger on the boy's face. When he lifted his head to look straight ahead, he saw his mother grabbing Estella's arm tightly and Estella sobbing in utmost distress in the living room. At that, Lucian frowned and strode over to pry his mother's hand away. "What are you doing? You have gone overboard." Upon hearing his mother's words, Lucian gave her a noncommittal nod. Assuming that he had agreed, Sonia turned around and prepared to take Estella with her. However, Lucian's voice suddenly rang out. "You might not be aware of how Essie was over the last 2 days." His words caused her to stop abruptly. Although she had heard from Catalina about Estella's autistic episode over the last 2 days, she wasn't aware of how serious it was. Essie's episode this time was more intense than the last. Even James had no solution for it. Only when she's with Roxanne does she behave like a normal child. Furthermore, Roxanne has even managed to get her to talk the other day. "Do you know how significant this is compared to the past?" Lucian questioned with a deep voice. "Essie has talked?" Sonia was filled with shock, as she had mentally prepared herself for Estella to remain mute her entire life. "I can't believe that woman managed to get her to speak." When he saw the astonishment on Sonia's face, Lucian pursed his lips. "I was equally surprised, but Sonia's scowl deepened. If I had come any later, my granddaughter was going to be someone else's granddaughter." She then shot her son a discontented look. She could not believe that he had not told her that an outsider was taking care of her granddaughter, let alone the fact that the outsider was Roxanne. Lucian's eyes then flicked toward Roxanne, who had a similar cold look on her face. The tension in the living room was palpable. Finally, Lucian looked back at his mother and uttered, "Let's have a talk." Right as he said that, he turned and exited the mansion. Sonia stared at her son's retreating figure dubiously and hesitantly for a few seconds before she followed him out. Just as she stepped out of the house, she said to her son, "Let me tell you now that, no matter what you say to me, I'm still going to take Essie away from here with me. There's no denying it. In fact, Essie refuses to leave Roxanne's side despite not even knowing the latter is her mother. Even if you refuse to admit it, there's no way you can erase the instinctive bond between them." Sonia knitted her brows in displeasure. She knew that Lucian was right despite her unwillingness to accept the truth. At that moment, she couldn't find the words to rebut him. "Mom, we have spent many years trying to cure Essie to no avail. But now, we finally have hope. Even if Essie accepts Roxanne, I have no objections as long as she can fully recover." Lucian spoke in a mellow and convincing voice. "Given how much you love Essie, I'm sure you, too, want the best for her. Therefore, I hope that you won't disrupt their lives anymore, as Essie can't afford to suffer another blow." Even though the thought of Estella's autism caused Sonia to waver, she still couldn't get over the past. She questioned angrily, "Are you saying that you are willing to accept her even after what she has done to you?" Lucian replied, "That's between the two of us. I'll deal with it properly." Sonia pressed on. "What about Essie? By allowing her to grow close to Roxanne, what's going to happen when she finds out that she was once abandoned by the latter? How will she feel? Will she be able to take it?" Lucian furrowed his brows together. Given that the matter was potentially a misunderstanding and it wasn't fully investigated yet, he had no intention of explaining. He simply answered, "There's no need for you to worry. Whatever Essie deserves to know, I won't hide it from her." In other words, he would continue his relationship with Roxanne and also allow Estella to do the same. Cognizant of her son's character, Sonia knew that whatever she said would be useless. Nonetheless, she still couldn't help but remind him of Aubrey. "What about Aubrey? What do you expect her to do? After she waited by your side for so many years and sacrificed so much for us, do you plan to abandon her just like that?" Lucian was filled with hatred at the mention of Aubrey. "Do you know why Essie resents her?" Stunned, Sonia explained at once, "Is it because of what Aubrey did to Essie? Didn't she explain it to us already? She didn't do it on purpose and was only worried about Essie's safety. It only happened under desperate circumstances. Will you really cancel the engagement?" Sonia's intentions were clear. She still hoped that Lucian would marry Aubrey. Over the last 6 years, she had pestered him many times about it. Lucian cocked a brow in annoyance. "I know what I'm doing. There's no need for you to interfere." Sonia was upset. "You know what you're doing? Are you really planning on cancelling the engagement?" Before Lucian could reply, Sonia's expression drastically changed while the resolve in her voice hardened. "No matter what, you personally agreed to the engagement with the Pearson family. You cannot disappoint her after how long she has waited. I forbid you from reneging on your word, so don't ever bring it up in front of me again." Subsequently, Sonia threw her son a stern look before shooting a glare at the mansion's main door. It was as if she could pierce through it with her eyes and see Roxanne inside. In the end, she recovered her gaze before storming off. After watching his mother's silhouette disappear, Lucian collected his emotions and returned to the mansion. Estella had stopped crying in Roxanne's arms and didn't appear to be badly affected. The moment she saw him enter, she jumped out of Roxanne's embrace and ran to hug his thigh. When she stared blankly at him, he could see that her eyes and nose were a bit red. After stroking her head to comfort her, Lucian shifted his gaze in Roxanne's direction. "I'm sorry that my mom has caused you trouble. I didn't expect her to suddenly come here." Having regained her composure, Roxanne nodded calmly. "It's fine. I'm not the least bit surprised by her attitude. After all, I left the Farwell family on very bad terms. Besides, she never approved of our marriage, and time has proven her right." Back then, Roxanne had married Lucian in spite of Sonia's objections. Unfortunately, they tormented each other in the end. Moreover, she regrets her action and has apologized to us about it. Just as she finished, she turned the tables on him. "As for you, you have gone overboard with your recent behavior toward her." When she returned to the country, she had considered the possibility of the Farwell family giving her trouble. Nevertheless, she never expected to be involved with Lucian again, let alone encounter Sonia under such circumstances. Lucian frowned slightly at her answer but didn't know what to say, for Roxanne was merely stating the facts. In fact, his mother's prejudice against her had never decreased one bit. Suddenly, silence descended upon the living room. "Ms. Jarvis, Mr. Farwell," Catalina remarked carefully. "It's time to send the children to school." Both of them were jolted back to their senses. When Roxanne held her son's hands, she hesitated for a while before looking at Lucian. "As for Essie, do you want to take her, or do you want me to continue looking after her?" Sonia's words earlier had reminded Roxanne that Estella couldn't stay by her side forever. Just when Lucian was about to reply, Estella released his leg and ran back to grab Roxanne's dress. Both Roxanne and Lucian were shocked by her reaction. When Estella heard for the second time that morning that she was going to leave Roxanne, her already reddened eyes moistened further. Giving Lucian a pleading look, she looked like she was going to continue crying if he were to decide to take her away. As he had no such intention, Lucian replied, "Please continue watching over her as her condition has yet to stabilize. When it's inconvenient for you to do so, you can let Catalina bring her home." When Roxanne saw how pitiful Estella looked, she nodded with a wavering heart. Upon Roxanne's agreement, Estella's miserable expression was replaced by a delightful smile. Patience is required on the way home from Roxanne's house. Sonia pondered upon the matter and decided to give Aubrey a call. Meanwhile, Aubrey was puzzled to receive Sonia's call so early in the morning. "Aubrey, I have already spoken to Lucian, and he will not speak of cancelling the engagement with you again." Even though Sonia had requested it unilaterally, she conveyed the decision simply because her son didn't object to it. Aubrey was ecstatic to hear the news. "Is it true, Mrs. Farwell?" Just as she spoke, she inquired further, "But what about Roxanne? She seems to be very close to Lucian. Furthermore, Essie likes her too." Sonia's tone turned grim at the mention of Roxanne. "Just ignore her, as only you can be Lucian's future wife. With regard to Essie, you have to be more patient with her, for she's still just a child. I'll let the matter slide this time, but you had better not do that again." Aubrey readily agreed, "Mrs. Farwell, please rest assured that I'll treat Essie as if she's my own daughter." Nevertheless, the thought of Estella staying with Roxanne over the last 2 days continued to unsettle her. Hence, she pried further. "By the way, has Essie gone home yet? I want to find an opportunity to apologize to her." Sonia replied in a lackluster tone, "Not yet. I wanted to bring her back, but her condition hasn't stabilized. She wants to stay with Roxanne, and it's also good for her recovery. By the time she feels better, I'll bring her back again." In response, an icy glint flashed across Aubrey's eyes. That despicable kid is still together with Roxanne. Prior to this, she has been the reason why Lucian doesn't like me and refuses to marry me. Now that she is growing closer to Roxanne, she might become the reason for him to remarry the latter. The more Aubrey thought about it, the more upset she became. Aware that her only hope continued to rest on Sonia, she maintained a cordial tone while speaking. "I understand, Mrs. Farwell. Essie's well-being takes priority." When Sonia heard Aubrey's caring words, she advised in a solemn tone, Aubrey, you have to be patient when it comes to getting what you want. Do you understand what I mean? I do, Mrs. Farwell. Don't worry, Aubrey replied calmly. Sonia nodded in satisfaction. Soon, I'll invite your parents to finalize your marriage. There's no need to feel anxious, as that will not help you achieve success. With the doubts in her heart removed, Aubrey's eyes lit up as she agreed with a smile. In the evening, Roxanne arrived at the kindergarten on the dot to collect the 3 children. There, Lucian was already waiting. She had assumed that he would stay for dinner just like the day before. However, he left right away after dropping them off at the door, saying that he was busy. Upon entering the house, they were welcomed by the dinner Catalina had prepared. After finishing their food, Roxanne played with the children for a while downstairs before ushering them to bed. Roxanne tucked Archie and Benny in and returned to her room, where Catalina had just given Estella a bath. Having put on her bunny pajamas, Estella looked like a stuffed toy as she sat starry-eyed on the bed while waiting for Roxanne. The moment she saw the latter enter, she broke into a sweet smile and stretched her arms out for a hug. As Roxanne picked Estella up, the latter wrapped her arms around Roxanne's neck obediently. When Estella laid her face against hers, Roxanne felt as if her heart was about to melt from the sensation. Getting involved again. The next morning, Roxanne sent the children to school alone as Lucian didn't come. When Pippa saw Roxanne by herself, she was surprised. "Ms. Jarvis, where's Mr. Farwell today?" Roxanne was briefly stunned by the comment. She wasn't expecting Pippa to notice that Lucian had brought the children to school with her over the last 2 days, let alone inquire about his absence. As it gave the impression that she and Lucian were close, Roxanne was stumped for an answer. Nonetheless, Estella brought out her notebook and wrote, "I'm living with Ms. Jarvis now." She then raised it up with a vibrant smile on her face. When Pippa saw how cheerful Estella was now in contrast to her listless expression from 2 days ago, she couldn't help but beam and stroke Estella's hair. "I see." Subsequently, she returned her gaze to Roxanne and was bowled over by how much Estella liked Roxanne and her sons. Roxanne heaved a sigh of relief in her mind when she saw Estella answer on her behalf. After handing the children over, she remarked, "Thanks for taking care of them." With that, she bid farewell to the children before driving off. Due to how busy she was taking care of Estella and managing the affairs of the research institute, she didn't manage to visit Alfred even though it was time for his next treatment. With that thought in mind, Roxanne turned her car around and headed to the Queen residence after confirming with Jonathan that it was a good time to visit. In the meantime, Jonathan was already waiting at home. He gave Roxanne a warm welcome the moment she entered. "Dr. Jarvis, I was already about to call you because you hadn't gotten in touch." Roxanne smiled apologetically. "Something came up the last 2 days. How is old Mr. Queen doing?" In truth, Jonathan was just making idle chatter and didn't mean to blame her. In response to her question, his eyes glistened in admiration. "Thanks to your amazing medical skills, Grandpa's condition has improved significantly. Or else, I would already be pestering you." Relieved to hear that Alfred was doing well, Roxanne went upstairs with her medical kit. Following her from behind, Jonathan furrowed his brows when he accidentally caught a glimpse of her hand that was holding the kit. "Did you hurt yourself?" Roxanne thought nothing of it. I accidentally scalded myself when I spilled soup on it. It's not a bother at all. After a momentary pause, she added, don't worry, it won't affect old Mr. Queen's treatment. Alfred had received advance notice of her arrival, so when they entered his room one after another, he was already sitting in bed. Roxanne took a seat by Alfred's bed and began the treatment after greeting him cordially. Even though the wound on her hand looked nasty, she no longer felt any pain due to the effectiveness of her own medication. Therefore, it wasn't a hindrance to her when she inserted the needles into Alfred's body. Once the treatment was completed, Roxanne started to pack up. Seeing that, Jonathan came over to help. Cognizant that he was concerned about her wound, Roxanne didn't stop him despite being briefly stunned. Upon arriving downstairs, Jonathan called out to her when she was about to leave. Dr. Jarvis, please hold on. Stopping in her tracks, she gave Jonathan a puzzled look as he retrieved something from a drawer and walked up to her. This is my family's best medication for burn wounds. As a doctor, you have to take good care of your hands, as they're indispensable. Just when she was about to thank him, Frida's cynical voice rang out. Jonathan, you had better not be so kind. Otherwise, you might end up making someone fall for you. Not what I meant. In the end, Roxanne's thanks never left her mouth. Jonathan, too, was stunned. Frowning at Frida, he reprimanded her, Frida, what are you blabbering about? With a shrug of her shoulders, Frida replied in nonchalance, I'm being serious. Even though someone has broken up with Lucian without saying a word back then, she's still thick-skinned enough to cling to him now. Doesn't she already know that Aubrey is with Lucian? What's the difference between her and a third party? As she spoke, Frida threw Roxanne a contemptuous look. I just can't stand her, and she'll never earn my respect even if she cures Grandpa. Although she didn't name names, it was clear that she was talking about Roxanne. As a gloomy expression gradually descended upon Roxanne's face, she said coldly, Miss Queen, instead of making snide comments, you had better learn some proper manners yourself before going around patronizing others. With a drastic change in her expression, Frida shot Roxanne a glare. How dare you accuse me of being ill-mannered? Roxanne met her gaze with an emotionless face. What has my affairs with Lucian got anything to do with you? This is my personal matter, and you have no right to interfere. As a lady of a prominent family, don't you think it's unbecoming of you to stick your nose in the business of others? Roxanne's admonishment rendered Frida speechless. She was worried about being labeled as uncultured if she continued the argument. Recovering her gaze, Roxanne warned, to me, you're nothing but a stranger. At most, you're just a family member of my patient. Hence, you better not question me about my personal affairs. With that, Roxanne bade goodbye to Jonathan and left before Frida could react. Watching Roxanne's leaving silhouette, Frida gritted her teeth in anger, for she had seen how Aubrey stayed by Lucian's side over the years. If it wasn't for her, Lucian would already have married Aubrey. And now that she has returned, she managed to draw Lucian's attention again. I don't know what gives her the cheek to even put on such airs. Aubrey has treated Grandpa very well over the years and isn't inferior to her in any way. How dare this homewrecker accuse me of being ill-mannered? When Jonathan saw the rage on Frida's face, he shot her a glare before chasing after Roxanne. "Dr. Jarvis!" Roxanne stopped and turned around upon hearing his voice. She was greeted by the sight of him running toward her. Giving him a baffled look, she asked, "What is it?" Jonathan was visibly apologetic. "I'm here to say sorry on my sister's behalf. I don't know what has gotten into her. She seems to be easily agitated recently and keeps making snarky remarks. Please don't take what she said to heart." Roxanne smiled plainly. "Don't worry. I won't. I won't stop treating old Mr. Queen because of her words either. That's not what I meant." Jonathan felt helpless. He admired Roxanne and felt that she would make a good friend. Yet, regardless of what he said, she would always steer the conversation back to Alfred's treatment. In no mood for idle chatter, Roxanne asked out of courtesy, "Is there anything else?" As it would be rude to hold her back, Jonathan replied, "That's all. Goodbye." Roxanne nodded before getting into her car. Picking up the children. After watching Roxanne drive away, Jonathan returned to the mansion. Frida, who was drinking coffee on the couch with a scowl on her face, gave him the side eye before recovering her gaze. Jonathan's expression darkened when he caught her reaction. "Why are you behaving this way? What has Dr. Jarvis done to you to be so hostile to her? Don't forget that she is Grandpa's savior." Frida looked at Jonathan and refuted, "Savior? It's not like we didn't offer her anything. We're just getting what each of us needs out of it." Filled with displeasure, she inquired further, "Jonathan, why are you standing up for her? Has she tricked you too? In response to you asking me how she has offended me, I should be asking you if she has gotten in your head." Jonathan glared at her. "Stop spewing nonsense. Whatever is going on between Dr. Jarvis and Lucian is between the two of them. We have no right to question her. You better not bring it up again." Noticing Jonathan's anger, Frida kept her mouth shut despite the indignance she felt inside. Even though Roxanne had no intention of taking Frida's words seriously, she couldn't help being affected by them. Therefore, she still felt disheartened when she returned to the research institute. After going on her rounds and realizing there wasn't much to do, she decided to go home and rest so that she could collect her thoughts. Just when she was about to leave, someone knocked on her door. Opening it, she saw that it was one of the reputable professors of the research institute. "Dr. Jarvis, thank goodness you're still here. We have encountered a problem with our formulation during our experiments. We've been trying the entire morning, but we can't seem to figure out what's wrong with it. Can you take a look at it for us?" With a solemn expression, Roxanne changed into her lab coat and followed him back to the lab. After going through it, she realized that the issue was indeed a serious one. As it was related to an important project of the Institute, she dived into the research without any delay. Before she knew it, it was already the evening, and she had forgotten about the children at school. "Dr. Jarvis, your phone is ringing," someone meekly reminded her. Jolted back to her senses, Roxanne picked up her phone from her lab pocket to check. When she saw the caller ID on the screen, her brows couldn't help but knit together. Ever since she started taking care of Estella, she had removed Lucian's number from her blacklist. "Why is he calling me at this hour? What is it?" Roxanne answered after a brief hesitation. Over at the other end, Lucian glanced at the time before asking in a deep voice, "Where are you now?" Roxanne replied, "I'm at the research institute. We're still figuring out a problem that we have encountered." "What's wrong?" Lucian frowned at her answer. "I understand. The kindergarten just called and said that they couldn't get you on the phone. Apparently, no one has picked up the children. Since you're busy, I'll collect them instead." Only then did Roxanne remember that the children were still at school. With regard to the boys, they were used to her picking them up late when she was bogged down by work. However, the concern was that Estella, who had just shown some progress, might be affected by it. Holding that thought, Roxanne began to feel bad. "I'm sorry. I was too caught up with work and didn't hear my phone. Why don't I go and pick them up?" Lucian was already on his way to the elevator with his jacket in his hand. "It's fine. It doesn't matter which of us does it. You should continue with your work." Just when Roxanne was about to say something, the call had already ended. "Why are you picking us up?" Staring at her phone, Roxanne hesitated briefly before putting it away and continuing with her research. Since she needed more time for work, she was glad that Lucian was able to take the task off her hands. Meanwhile, the three children were sitting on a bench at the kindergarten field with their bags behind their backs. Used to the fact that Roxanne would run late due to work, the boys sat upright and chatted with Pippa occasionally. Sitting between the two brothers, Estella started out feeling anxious. However, after a while, she began to be slowly distracted until she cupped her chin with her hands and listened intently to their conversation. Even when Lucian arrived, none of them noticed his presence. When he saw the three of them sitting together, Lucian felt his heart warm up. Subconsciously, he quickened his pace and hurried up to them. "Mr. Farwell," Pippa greeted when she saw him. Only then did the children look up and reacted with disappointment at the sight of him. Faced with the drastic change in the children's expressions, Lucian cocked a brow but didn't comment. Instead, he informed Pippa, "I'm sorry, I was caught up with work. I'll be picking Archie and Benny up, too." Well aware that the three children were always together the past few days, Pippa didn't inquire any further. After handing them over to him, she took her leave and went home. In spite of that, the children continued to sit on the bench without moving. Lucian stared at them in amusement. "Do you still feel like sitting here for a while?" Benny shook his head in reflex, for he didn't want to continue staying there. The air was cold, while the bench was hard. Moreover, his bag was heavy, and he could already hear his stomach growling. Archie looked at Lucian with a serious expression. "Where's Mommy? Why are you the one picking us up?" Estella, too, stared at her daddy and awaited his reply. "She's still busy at the research institute, and it would be too late by the time she's done. I came over first to take all of you to dinner," Lucian summarized. "Besides, I'm sure all of you are hungry. Come with me." Nevertheless, Archie remained hesitant. As for Benny, he was famished and also excited that he finally had an opportunity to spend time with his father. However, when he didn't hear Archie's response, he, too, fell silent and waited for his brother to express his thoughts. When it came to Estella, she had no objections, for she was used to eating with Lucian. In spite of that, she remained seated when she didn't see any movement from the boys. Noticing the expectant look in Benny's eyes, Archie paused for a moment before indicating his agreement by getting off the bench. Behaving just like his lackeys, Benny and Estella followed suit. Even though no words were exchanged, Lucian recognized their tacit agreement to have dinner with him. After the four of them got into the car, Lucian drove, while the children sat in a uniform row behind. "Since I don't know what you like, I'll just bring you to one of Estella's favorite restaurants," Lucian decided on the spot. Benny answered without another thought. "I'm fine with that." Just as he spoke, he felt a tug from Archie and proceeded to keep his mouth shut sheepishly. Without another word, Lucian drove them straight to the restaurant. The high-end restaurant they were brought to had a historical look to it. Since Archie and Benny grew up overseas, they had never seen such a design before. Hence, they looked around curiously once they took their seats. Lucian felt a warm sensation in his heart when he saw how their interest was piqued. "What would you like to eat?" "I dislike him for leaving us." Feeling famished, Benny recovered his gaze from the decorations the moment he heard Lucian mention food. He counted with his fingers. "I would like pork ribs, fried fish, drumsticks. All these are our favorite food." Lucian subsequently turned his attention toward Archie, who wasn't keen on answering initially. However, since Benny had replied on his behalf, Archie had no choice but to quietly nod. After ordering the food based on the children's taste, Lucian didn't know what to talk to them about, causing an awkward silence to fall upon the table. Once the dishes arrived, Lucian instructed the waiter to place them in front of the boys. It was only then that Archie uttered in a cordial yet distant tone, "Thank you, Mr. Farwell." "Don't mention it." Lucian nodded in acknowledgement. His tone sounded awkward as he had seldom spent time interacting with them. During dinner, he would serve them food even though he didn't feed them as Roxanne did. Nonetheless, the children wolfed down their food. "Is the food right to your taste?" Finally, Lucian thought of what to ask after struggling to find a topic. Raising his head, Benny rubbed his stomach before giving the question some thought. In the end, he responded in an earnest tone, "It's delicious but not as good as Mommy's cooking." Lucian cocked his brow in surprise. "Does your mommy cook often?" Without thinking twice, Benny replied candidly, "Hmm. She'll cook for us when she's not busy. But when she's overwhelmed by work, she won't even have time to eat." At that moment, a concerned expression emerged on his face, for he was sure that she had yet to eat. Meanwhile, Estella's eyes lit up in envy. She, too, wanted to have Roxanne's cooking every day. Oblivious to what was going through their minds, Lucian remained curious about Archie and Benny's daily lives. "In that case, how do you cope when your mommy is busy?" The moment the words left his mouth, Lucian regretted it at once. If Roxanne is busy, their father would naturally be the one to take care of them. There's no way the three of them lived overseas alone. With that thought in mind, Lucian couldn't help but think about Roxanne. Compared to 6 years ago, she looked sterner now. He figured that her losing weight might be one of the reasons behind it. Unaware of what was going through Lucian's mind, Benny answered naively, "When Mommy is busy, her professor or assistant will help to babysit us." Sometimes, she'll even bring us to the research institute, where her colleagues adore us." Rattled back to his senses, Lucian was baffled and a little displeased. "What about your daddy? Why doesn't he take care of you?" His words stunned the brothers. "Daddy? Our daddy is sitting right in front of us. He just doesn't know it." Putting his cutlery down, Archie furrowed his brows and stopped Benny from speaking. He stared at Lucian and demanded, "What do you want to know?" Lucian was slightly shocked. A brief moment later, he pursed his lips as if nothing had happened and replied, "Nothing, I was just showing some concern." After staring at Lucian for quite a while, Archie recovered his exasperated gaze before asserting in a firm tone, "Ever since we were born, we have not seen our daddy. He's a villain for abandoning mommy and us. Therefore, I don't like him." When he finished, Archie raised his head to give Lucian another glance before going back to his food. Disappointment. Meanwhile, Benny, who had something to say, swallowed his words after his brother's tirade. "I have almost forgotten that Daddy is a villain, and we were supposed to ignore him." Lucian frowned when he sensed the unhappiness in the boys. Realizing that he had asked an inappropriate question, he apologized, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bring up your painful past." Despite opening his mouth, no words came out after that, for he didn't know how else to comfort them. Archie lowered his head and pretended to focus on his food. "It's all right. We have gotten used to it, anyway," he said. At that moment, the atmosphere at the table grew tense. Unable to restrain himself after eating in silence, Benny raised a teary-eyed gaze at Lucian. "Mr. Farwell, do you like children?" Lucian was dumbstruck by the look on Benny's face. Benny continued with his soliloquy. "I suppose you do, as I can see that you treat Essie very well. Since you don't hate children, why do you dislike us then?" While speaking, Benny looked at Lucian with puppy eyes. "It's clear that you don't hate kids, so why did you abandon us, Daddy?" He was on the brink of vocalizing the question in his mind. Startled by his brother's words, Archie was well aware of what the former wanted to ask. Hence, he preempted the question by serving him some food. "Didn't you say that you were hungry? Here, eat up." Despite the sadness within him, he didn't want to show it in front of Lucian. Furthermore, he knew that Roxanne didn't want Lucian to know their identity. Having been reminded by his brother, Benny pouted and continued to eat the food on his plate. However, he no longer took any extras. In the end, Lucian had no answers to Benny's questions. In fact, he was intrigued about the actual genesis of the questions. Subsequently, the tension at the table intensified with no one saying another word until dinner was over. When Estella, who didn't speak anyway, saw the somber mood the brothers were in, she felt equally glum. As the only adult at the table, Lucian tried to liven up the atmosphere with new topics but failed when the brothers just refused to talk. Once dinner was over, he sent the children back to Roxanne's house. As Roxanne wasn't back yet, Catalina, who was feeling worried, was relieved to see Lucian and the children. Instead of leaving right away, Lucian stayed to make small talk with Catalina while watching the children play in the living room. It wasn't until around 8 o'clock that Roxanne finally returned from work. However, the children only threw her a glance and didn't rush to welcome her like they usually did. From their response, Roxanne could sense that something was amiss with their mood. Since Lucian was still around, she went over and asked, "What has gotten into them? Were they bullied in school?" Furrowing his brows slightly, Lucian gave her an apologetic look. "They became like that after I inquired about their father during dinner. I'm sorry, I didn't do it on purpose." Roxanne was startled by his words. After she regained her composure, her expression was a bit dark. "What did you ask them such a question for?" Unable to figure out the reason for it, Lucian was momentarily speechless. Roxanne suppressed the panic within her and gave him a stern warning. "Both of them grew up without a father and don't like others bringing it up. Therefore, Mr. Farwell, please do not ask them such questions ever again." Heartache. Lucian assumed that Roxanne was angry because the children were upset. Thus, he promised in an apologetic tone, "I didn't know that before. Now that I do, you can rest assured that I won't mention this in front of them again." After glancing at the children, who were playing Lego, Roxanne suddenly felt what a close shave it was for Lucian to talk to the boys about their father. With nothing else to say to him, she hinted for him to leave. "It's getting late, Mr. Farwell. Why don't you head home first? Thank you for taking the trouble to pick the kids up on my behalf today." After a brief hesitation, Lucian nodded before leaving. On the journey home, he felt extremely unsettled but couldn't put a finger on what it was. When he arrived, he removed his tie in frustration and sat on the couch for a while. Even then, he continued to feel disturbed. Subsequently, he brought out a bottle of wine from the cabinet, sitting by the window to drink alone. After 2 glasses, images of what happened at dinner gradually emerged in his mind. The children were giving him angry yet pitiful looks while demanding to know why he didn't like them. With their faces and tone in his mind, Lucian couldn't help but feel a piercing pain in his heart. After Lucian was gone, Roxanne played with the children for a while before sending them to bed. Having tucked Estella in, Roxanne pondered a moment before knocking on the boys' door. Meanwhile, both of them were unable to sleep as they were still disturbed by the event earlier. "Mommy, what is it?" Archie asked curiously when he opened the door and saw her. Roxanne tousled his hair. "I just want to have a talk with both of you. Let's go inside." Archie nodded before climbing back up to bed. He looked exceptionally adorable in his cow print pajamas while his loose fringes billowed in front of his eyes. As her heart softened, Roxanne closed the door and settled down by the bedside. She asked softly, "Did Mr. Farwell ask you about your daddy during dinner?" The boys nodded in unison. Archie added in his squeaky voice, "We told him that we don't have a daddy and also the fact that we dislike our daddy." Roxanne felt her heart clam up in response. She could sense a faint sadness in the boy's tone. After all, she had kept their family origins from them and told them that they didn't have a father. However, if I were to tell them the man they had dinner with was their daddy, how would they react? Making it up to her feeling bad for making the boys sad, Lucian didn't show up for the next few days. Instead, he would occasionally send a message to check in on Estella. As for Roxanne, she heightened her vigilance after what happened and was secretly relieved that he didn't drop by. When she saw that his messages were not related to the boys, she replied to all of them accordingly. From the frequent messages that he sent, Roxanne could see how much he cared for Estella. Since he cares so much about her, why hasn't he made an appearance? Is he not worried about leaving her with me just like that? I really have no idea what's going through that mind of his. Luckily, Estella was adorable. Not only did she have exquisite features, she was also exceptionally obedient. Every time she cozied up to Roxanne, Roxanne would be reminded of the daughter she had lost. If she managed to grow up safely, she would be Essie's age. Boys. Do you feel that you're different from other children? Have you ever thought of wanting a daddy? Roxanne asked after a momentary pause. The boys shook their heads. No. Roxanne's brows knitted slightly. But, they're clearly saddened by the events of the evening. With each of them holding one of her arms, they put on a serious expression. Even though we don't have a daddy, we still have you, and you are the best mommy in the whole wide world. No one can compare to you, so we're the envy of all our friends. As if to prove a point, Benny gave Roxanne an earnest look. Although Essie has a daddy, she still prefers you because you're the best. Therefore, we don't need a daddy at all. Roxanne was both touched and heartbroken at the same time. Hugging the children in a tight embrace, she didn't say a word for a long time. With that thought in mind, Roxanne treated Estella as if she was family. Deep down, she felt that being nice to the latter was her way of making it up to her lost daughter. After spending a lot of time together, Archie and Benny began to see Estella as their own sister. Whether they were at home or in kindergarten, they would constantly protect her. Meanwhile, Estella smiled all the time during her stay with Roxanne. When Roxanne saw how happy Estella was, she could feel her heartstrings being tugged. At the rate they were progressing, Estella's condition quickly stabilized. In other words, she would be able to go home soon. Holding that thought, Roxanne began to feel reluctant to part with Estella. During the weekend, Roxanne planned to take them out for the day, as they have not gone on an outing ever since Estella started staying with them. Mommy! Archie and Benny approached her enthusiastically. Let's take Essie to the aquarium. Hearing that, Roxanne looked in Estella's direction to seek her opinion. The latter nodded obediently. As long as I can stay with Ms. Jarvis, Archie, and Benny, it doesn't matter where I go. With that, Roxanne got the children to pack up before heading to the aquarium together. Since Lucian was usually busy with work, he seldom brought Estella out. As for Archie and Benny, it was the first time both of them visited an aquarium in the country. The moment the children entered the aquarium, they were captivated by the smorgasbord of marine life in it. From time to time, they would stop to interact with the fishes. Roxanne would patiently wait and take pictures for them. Furthermore, she would also provide an explanation of the fish that she recognized. As a result, the children had a blast inside. Afterward, Roxanne took them to the children's activity center where she sat by the side and waited. Just then, her phone rang. When she saw who it was, her brows slightly knitted. Lucian? He has only been sending messages recently, so why is he calling now? Lucian's voice rang out once the call connected. Where are you? Roxanne was briefly stunned. Did something come up? Lucian replied in a deep voice. I brought Essie something, but Catalina told me that you guys have gone out. Where are you? I'll go over instead. He dropped by early in the morning to see Estella but didn't find her there. When Caden asked him whether he wanted to go home, Lucian hesitated before giving Roxanne a call. Since it was about Estella, Roxanne pondered briefly before replying, "We're at the aquarium." Over the line, Lucian's voice rang out at once. "I'll head over right away." Estella spoke again. After hanging up, Roxanne could not help but worry as she watched the three children playing happily. Due to what happened previously, she was concerned that Lucian would bring up Archie and Benny's background again. Furthermore, she did not want Lucian to find out about Estella's present condition and decided to take her back. Soon, Lucian called again. "I have arrived. Which attraction are you at?" At the same time, the three children urged Roxanne to bring them to a beluga whale performance. Thus, Roxanne agreed to the children's requests and replied to Lucian, "We will wait for you at the beluga whale aquarium." After hanging up, Roxanne went to the beluga whale aquarium with the children. Meanwhile, Lucian and Caden bought tickets before heading there too. Roxanne led the children to sit in the front row near the side. Soon, Lucian came in and saw them instantly. He went to sit beside them. Estella greeted Lucian happily upon seeing him but soon turned her attention back to the beluga whale performance. On the other hand, Archie and Benny only nodded in his direction and did not bother to say hi. Lucian could see Archie and Benny still did not want to talk to him. He knew it was due to what happened during dinner that night and felt frustrated. Meanwhile, Roxanne also only greeted him briefly before turning her attention to the performance. Seeing this, Lucian had no choice but to remain silent. An aquarium staff stood below the stage and alternated between directing the beluga whales to leap out of the water or getting them to spin around. The beluga whales carried out the orders perfectly and looked adorable. The children watched with sparkles in their eyes. "Is there anyone among the audience who would like to come and play with our beluga whales?" The staff turned to look at the audience. The children raised their hands excitedly upon hearing the offer. Benny stretched his hand as high as he could and shouted, "Me! Me!" To their delight, the staff turned to them and said, "The two boys and a girl over there. I can see you like beluga whales very much. Why don't you come here to play with them?" Hearing that, the children jumped with joy but did not forget to seek Roxanne's permission. As Roxanne was concerned about the children's safety, the staff added, "May I ask the parents to come here with the children?" Therefore, Roxanne and the children held hands and went to the side of the pool. Then, they followed the staff's instructions and played with the beluga whales for a while. Soon, it was break time, but the four of them stayed by the pool. The staff found the children's enthusiasm endearing and guided them to interact with the beluga whales. Meanwhile, Roxanne watched from the side. Archie and Benny stayed together. Benny had always been playful. He kneeled by the pool and scooped water onto the beluga whale. "I'm bathing you. You must stay still and not move." However, why would the beluga whale listen to his instruction? It kept splashing water back at Benny. Thus, Benny and the beluga whale splashed water at each other. The water soon drenched Archie, who watched from the side. Archie was annoyed and stepped further away from them. On the other hand, Estella squatted quietly by the pool and gently patted a beluga whale's head. She looked at it adoringly. The beluga whale floated near the surface obediently and accepted her touch. The staff saw how well Estella was getting along with the small beluga whale and gave instructions to the beluga whale from behind Estella. Suddenly, the beluga whale leaped out of the water's surface. The sudden movement shocked Estella, and she tried to step away. However, she felt a cool sensation on her cheek. Soon, the beluga whale dived back into the water with a splash. Estella was stunned for a few seconds and turned to Roxanne excitedly to share her joy. "Wow, Ms. Jarvis, the beluga whale kissed me." It was always related to her. Roxanne could hear Estella's childish voice clearly through the splashing noise. She could not help but remain stunned for a moment, thinking she had misheard. Then, she looked at Estella with an astonished expression. Benny was also stunned and stopped whatever he was doing. He did not even care about water splashing on him. However, Estella soon continued playing with the beluga whale. She did not notice Roxanne and the others' shocked expressions. The staff finally let them return to their seats when the next segment began. Roxanne and the two boys were still stunned. On the other hand, Estella held Roxanne's hand and sat down like nothing strange had happened. Lucian noticed their dazed expressions and asked with a frown, "What's wrong?" Roxanne finally came to her senses. She glanced at Estella before whispering, "Estella." She seemed to have spoken just now. Furthermore, she spoke fluently and has a lovely voice. Lucian glanced at his daughter with a surprised expression and asked, "What did she say?" Roxanne was taken aback by his question. She was too surprised by Estella speaking suddenly and could not remember what Estella said. Archie chimed in. "She said the beluga whale kissed her." Next to Archie, Benny could not resist his curiosity and asked, "Isn't Essie mute?" They had always thought Estella was mute. After all, they had never heard her speak since they first met her. Lucian frowned and answered, "When did I ever say that Essie was mute?" Archie and Benny exchanged glances. Roxanne asked in confusion, "Essie doesn't speak. You also prepared a notepad so that she can write to communicate." Lucian felt a little helpless as they mentioned this matter. Estella was usually unwilling to speak because of autism. "Even I only hear a few words from her occasionally. Thankfully, she is willing to write to communicate with us." Roxanne suddenly remembered how Estella was when something triggered her autism. Her heart ached for Estella. On the other hand, Lucian looked conflicted. Estella was diagnosed with autism when she was little. Thus, Lucian could count on the fingers of one hand the number of times she spoke. The last time Estella spoke was when she was anxious about Roxanne leaving. If what Roxanne and the boys said were true, Estella spoke again in Roxanne's presence. The two times she had spoken concerned Roxanne. Could it be the special bond between a mother and daughter? Lucian's eyes darkened as he thought about this. Then, he turned to Estella and asked gently, "Essie, did you have fun playing with the beluga whale just now?" Estella smiled, forming dimples on her cheeks. She nodded obediently but did not speak. That prompted Lucian to frown slightly. However, he continued to attempt to coax her to speak. "What did you play with the beluga whale? Can you tell me about it?" Benny heard Estella speak for the first time just now. He was curious and wanted to hear more. Thus, he urged Estella, "Essie, tell me too. My beluga whale would not listen to me. I bathed it, but it sprayed water all over Archie and me. How was yours so obedient?" Estella knitted her brow slightly and became flustered by their numerous questions. She searched through Roxanne's bag to find a pencil and paper to write to them. Lucian saw what Estella was planning to do and frowned. He did not ask any more questions. Who dares to ignore him? Roxanne guessed what Lucian was planning and could not help but anticipate what Estella would say. Although she was disappointed to see Estella taking a pencil and paper from her bag, she did not show it in her expression. "Don't worry. Estella has just started to improve and still needs time to stabilize. She probably only speaks when she is excited about something. So, let's be patient." And Lucian nodded quietly. He found himself agreeing with Roxanne. The fact that Estella said something was already a good development. Thus, he should not demand too much but let her improve naturally. Estella wrote for a while and took some time to think. Then, she finally answered all their questions. Lucian and Benny listened to her attentively and gave encouraging responses. The beluga whale performance came to an end, but the three children were still reluctant to leave. Roxanne saw that there was still time and continued to let them play in the marine park. Lucian was not sure why he came here today. Thus, he followed behind them and accompanied Roxanne and the children as they toured around the marine park. During this time, the three children kept pulling Roxanne with them as they ran around. They seemed to have forgotten about Lucian. Lucian looked at how happy they were and had an inexplicable sense that they had forgotten him. It was bad enough that Roxanne, Archie, and Benny ignored him. Even Estella had forgotten about him. Meanwhile, Caden had received instructions not to disturb them. Therefore, he followed behind Lucian quietly from a distance. He had witnessed Lucian being left out by his family a few times. Yet, Lucian would always follow them quietly. Thus, Caden could not help but pity him. Mr. Farwell had never suffered such indignity. Everyone in Harrington knew the Farwell group. Who would dare to ignore him? Perhaps only these four people before him. Lucian could vaguely sense that it was Archie and Benny who excluded him. Ultimately, they were still unhappy over the conversation during dinner that night. Lucian did not expect them to still hold a grudge over the matter. After figuring out the reason, Lucian did not say anything but followed Roxanne and the children quietly. They remained in the marine park until evening, nearing its closing time. By then, the children were tired and had played at every available attraction in the marine park. Roxanne had not expected to spend so much time in the marine park and was exhausted. She was relieved that the children were finally tired and decided to send them home. However, Lucian continued to follow them. Roxanne did not mind. She thought he only wanted to spend some time with Estella and would leave soon. Then, she noticed he still followed them even when they reached the underground parking. Roxanne felt frustrated and said, "Mr. Farwell, are there other matters? I'm bringing them home if there is nothing else." Hearing her, the three children all turned to look at Lucian curiously. Lucian nodded. "Please wait for a moment. I have something for Estella in the car." After saying that, he headed to his car to get something. Roxanne was puzzled. Estella had been staying at her place for nearly a week. She did not think Estella lacked anything. Soon, Lucian and Caden came over, holding a large box each. "What are these?" Roxanne frowned slightly. One of the boxes contained a few limited edition robot figurines, while the other box had high-tech small cars and robot models. Everything looked expensive. Roxanne knew about them because Archie and Benny liked these things. Thus, she instantly recognized what Lucian had brought. She grew suspicious. None of these look like something Estella would be interested in. Instead, they are the things Archie and Benny like. Presents to express apology. Roxanne hesitated before asking, "These aren't for Estella, right?" Lucian admitted to it straight away, "I bought these for Archie and Benny. I'd misspoken a few days ago. After returning home, I thought over what I said and felt I should apologize even though they were children. I noticed something similar in your house and thought Archie and Benny would like these." After saying that, Lucian looked at Archie and Benny solemnly and offered a box to them. "I'm sorry for what I said before. I hope these are to your liking." Archie and Benny looked at the toys delightedly. It was normal for boys to love robots and race cars. Furthermore, Archie and Benny had much higher IQs than their peers. Therefore, they preferred more complicated toys and were interested in high-tech ones. They used to badger Roxanne to buy them. However, some of these were too expensive. Although they liked those toys very much, they were sensible and did not mention them to Roxanne. Thus, they were surprised that Lucian knew what they liked. Benny could not resist taking a couple of steps toward Lucian and looking into the box. It contained all the toys he coveted on the website. He nearly used the small fortune Archie earned in stock trading to get them, causing Archie to scold him. Although Archie liked the toys, he could not forget that Lucian abandoned his mother. He stood still with a stern expression but could not resist looking into the boxes. One could see Archie and Benny desired the presents from Lucian. Benny looked at the toys for a long time before turning to his mother and seeking her opinion. "If Mommy disagrees, I will never accept the toys, no matter how much I like them." Roxanne looked at Archie and Benny's expressions and began to relent. However, she hesitated again as she looked at the things Lucian was holding. She had noticed Archie and Benny checking out those toy models and figurines on the web. They were all highly sought-after limited editions. The race car model Lucian held cost 200,000. Furthermore, the price is still rising due to market demand. Since Lucian wanted to apologize to the children, she would not stop him from giving them presents. However, those presents were too expensive. Benny seemed to understand what Roxanne was thinking. He looked at the models longingly before returning to Archie's side. Still, Roxanne relented when she saw his disappointed expression. Thus, she said, "That's thoughtful of you. My sons love these toys. However, the toys are too expensive, so let me know how much they cost. I will transfer the money to you." Lucian frowned upon hearing her. "I prepared these presents as an apology, so how can I ask you to pay? Furthermore, you must have spent a lot on Essie's expenses. These toys are only a small gift from me. I'm afraid they are not even good enough to express my remorse. Thus, if you insist on paying, there is no sincerity left." Roxanne hesitated upon hearing his explanation. Although the money Lucian spent on the gifts was only a minute sum to him, Roxanne still felt uncomfortable accepting the presents. Lucian understood what she was thinking and replied solemnly, "If you insist on paying, I should also pay you much more than this for taking good care of Essie. You have improved her condition tremendously. Will you be willing to accept my payment?" Roxanne finally gave up refusing the presents. She nodded toward Archie and Benny. "Since they are presents from Mr. Farwell, you should accept them." Hearing her, Archie responded with a polite but detached tone, "Thank you, Mr. Farwell." His speech moved her. Lucian and Caden brought the boxes of toys to Roxanne's car. Then, they said goodbye and left. After getting into the car, Caden hesitated and asked, "Mr. Farwell, are you not going to spend more time with Ms. Estella?" Ms. Estella has been staying in Roxanne's home all this while and rarely interacts with Mr. Farwell. I'm concerned they would grow distant from the lack of interaction. Lucian shook his head but did not say anything. Archie and Benny have not truly forgiven me. I have already followed them for a day and finally managed to redeem myself a little through gifts. If I continued to follow them, I would lose the little goodwill I received. Lucian felt his head throbbing as he thought about Archie and Benny's attitude toward him. Suddenly, a phone rang in the car. Lucian adjusted his emotions and answered the call with a frown. "What is the matter?" It was a call from Jonathan. "Lucian, are you free in a couple of days? It will be my grandpa's 70th birthday soon. Initially, we did not plan to organize a banquet. However, he has become much healthier recently, so we plan to have a huge celebration. You must come to the banquet." Lucian replied in a deep voice, "Sure, I will spare some time to attend it." Alfred had treated Lucian well. Furthermore, Lucian worked hard to find a way to cure Alfred. Therefore, he planned to attend Alfred's 70th birthday banquet. Meanwhile, Roxanne went home with the three children. Archie and Benny could not wait to unbox the figurines the instant they got home. They played with the figurines until midnight. Since they did not have to go to school the next day, Roxanne did not stop them but coaxed Estella to sleep. The following morning, Roxanne let Catalina take care of the children while she went to the Queen residence to treat Alfred's illness. Jonathan was present during the treatment and discussed the details of the birthday banquet with Alfred. Suddenly, Jonathan turned to Roxanne and asked, "Dr. Jarvis, will you be free to attend Grandpa's birthday banquet in a couple of days? I can include you on the invitation list." Roxanne had just finished with Alfred's medical treatment and was surprised to receive an invitation to the birthday banquet. She had listened to Jonathan and Alfred's conversation and knew it would be quite the affair. They had invited many prominent people in Harrington and prestigious families that were closely acquainted with the Queen family. On the other hand, Roxanne was only a newcomer and a little-known doctor in Harrington. She believed she had no place at this birthday banquet. Therefore, Roxanne hesitated and decided to refuse in the end. "I think I'd better not. I'm not good with such opulent social gatherings." Hearing her, Alfred responded immediately, "Dr. Jarvis, it is all thanks to you that I can have a birthday banquet this time. If not for your efforts, I would still be bedridden. Therefore, I hope you can attend this birthday banquet. It would make me happy to have you there. Also, Don't worry. If you dislike socializing, I will make sure that no one disturbs you. Roxanne did not know how to refuse in the face of Alfred's enthusiastic invitation. Then, Jonathan smiled and added, even if you are not good at socializing, you will still have to learn it eventually. You are now in charge of a research institute, so you will have to interact with these people. Furthermore, you can use this opportunity to get to know some of them. Who knows? You might bring good business opportunities to the research institute. Those words struck a chord with Roxanne. Give up on him. It was the afternoon. Aubrey and Frida sat opposite each other in 1000 Degrees Cafe drinking coffee and chatting. They suddenly talked about Alfred's 70th birthday banquet. Aubrey, will you be attending my grandpa's 70th birthday banquet? Frida asked cryptically. Aubrey had heard about the birthday banquet. Since the Queen family was closely acquainted with the Farwell family, Aubrey believed she would have to attend. Thus, she nodded and said, I'm going. Why? Frida asked, Irma. Would Lucian be attending with you? Everyone knows you are a couple. Aubrey hesitated upon hearing this. She knew Lucian would attend. However, she did not expect him to ask her to go with him. Although Lucian did not cancel their engagement all these years, he behaved indifferently toward her. However, Frida was unaware of Aubrey's concerns and continued, both of you must attend together. Then, you can show that woman who you are. Frida hated Roxanne for her cold attitude toward her. That was why Frida invited Aubrey to meet and discuss the birthday banquet. Roxanne is nothing without Lucian's protection. I want to show her who Lucian truly loves. Aubrey naturally knew who Frida meant. Her heart sank as she remembered how Lucian treated Roxanne, prompting her to reply immediately, of course. Lucian and I are in a relationship. We will attend the birthday banquet together. Frida was delighted to hear that. Therefore, Roxanne nodded and said, thank you for having such good regard for me, old Mr. Queen. In that case, I shall accept the invitation and will show up on time. Before leaving, Roxanne briefly explained the subsequent treatment to Alfred. You have 1 session of treatment left. After this, you only have to rest and recuperate. I will prescribe some medicine for you, so you must remember to take them on time. If you do, you will gradually recover. Jonathan and Alfred answered in the affirmative and thanked her. That's wonderful. You have no idea how arrogant that woman was lately. She doesn't know her place, so I can't wait to see her face when you show up at the birthday banquet with Lucian. Aubrey was looking forward to it too. Things had not been going well for Aubrey ever since Roxanne returned to the country. Good. I can use this chance to make her give up on Lucian completely. Then, Aubrey and Frida finished their coffee and went shopping before they parted ways. Aubrey became anxious about the coming birthday banquet once she returned home. Although she promised Frida to attend the birthday banquet with Lucian, she did not know how she could convince Lucian to do that. After considering for some time, Aubrey decided to summon the courage and called Sonia on the phone. What is the matter? Sonia's voice sounded the second the call connected. Aubrey calmed her emotions and said apologetically, Mrs. Farwell, I heard old Mr. Queen is having a birthday banquet soon. Will Lucian be attending? He will, Sonia replied matter-of-factly. After saying that, Sonia remembered Aubrey and Lucian had quarreled about Estella. Thus, she persuaded Aubrey. When the time comes, you should apologize to him. I will put in a good word for you. Both of you shouldn't continue to quarrel like this. Aubrey agreed, I think so too. However, Lucian keeps avoiding me. I fear he would not want to meet me during the birthday banquet. She made herself sound aggrieved. Sonia had not thought about this. Hearing Aubrey, she considered for a few seconds before replying, that won't happen. You only have to get ready. I will tell Lucian to pick you up for the birthday banquet and attend it with you. Aubrey was delighted to hear this, but she pretended to sound nervous. Sure, I will get ready. After that, Sonia reminded Aubrey about a few other matters before hanging up. Aubrey could not conceal her glee. She did not expect such an easy solution to her worries. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.